This episode of the Mosaic Life Podcast is brought to you by the Mosaic Life Circle. If you are a fan of the podcast, you're going to want to sign up for our regular email newsletter, which will alert you of brand new episode releases, new guest announcements, contest announcements, merchandise deals, which will be happening very soon, as well as exclusive Instagram content. We have our Full Circle Instagram television channel in which Ernie sits down with prior guests to dig deeper into some of the conversations we've had with them in the past. He most recently sat down with Scott Hilburn from episode 28. I highly encourage you check that out at One Mosaic Life. And while you're on the internet, sign up for our Full Circle email newsletter at onemosaic.life today. Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Mosaic Life Podcast. Whether this is your first time joining us or your 43rd, thank you for being here. We truly, truly appreciate it. Before we get started, I would like to wish a very happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there who are listening. It is June 21st, so happy Father's Day to you, and a very special happy Father's Day to my podcast partner, Ernie, who is a father himself. So thank you all, and have a great, great day in your honor. In this episode, in this conversation, Ernie and I, we talk mostly about a race that I did a few weeks ago. It was called the Find Your Limit race, where you basically just ran until you couldn't run anymore. I'm not going to spoil any of the details for you, but through that, we had a very lengthy discussion about finding one's edge and what that means and how you can push past it. And going into this, I want to think about what your preconceived edges are, what your preconceived limits are. Are those physical limits, or are those excuses for why you think you can't push yourself any farther? Why you can't beat your personal record when it comes to that race, or when it comes to lifting a certain amount of weight, or when it comes just to performing your best in your individual field. Why are you not able to push yourself farther? And we really dig into why we have set our own limits in our lives and what it would take for us to get past those. And we've got a couple great book recommendations in this episode, as well as tying in some of our previous episodes and guests. I truly think you're going to enjoy this episode, whether you're a runner or not. It has nothing to do with it. It's about realizing that we are capable of so much more than we tell ourselves. So without further ado, please enjoy this very passionate conversation from Ernie and myself on the Mosaic Life Podcast. Welcome to the Mosaic Life Podcast.
Life is an art. Every moment a picture painted in time. The color, texture, lighting, all context. The Mosaic Life vision is to cast a warm glow on your masterpiece, highlighting the struggle while showcasing the culmination of years of hard work.
Join us for guided meditations, interviews with authors and leaders, and engaging conversation as we explore the depths of our consciousness.
Welcome to the Mosaic Life Podcast. Welcome back, or welcome in for the first time. We thank you for showing up continually, or even just showing up to give us a try, to spend some time with us, and to see what happens in your life when you embrace different messages in the world and expand your outlook. And that's what we hope to do here. And so I'm here again with Trey. How's it going, man?
I'm doing well, Ernie. How are you?
I'm good. Trying to figure out how to be the hype man for the podcast. Like, yo, let's go.
I love when I go back and edit, there's always just a different feel when you lead us into the conversation. It's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just different. And I like it. I like it a lot.
Okay. It's called Awkward Turtle. How's it going, man? What's good today?
Oh, I'm good. Right now, kind of riding the high of, again, I know our production schedule, regardless, right now I'm riding the high of releasing our interview, our conversation with Mike Caden, the CEO of Red Circle. if it wasn't obvious, both from my introduction of the episode and from the actual conversation, I have always had, I'll say it, I've always had a hard on for Silicon Valley and tech. And it was truly a dream to be able to talk with him. And I know there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad out of that culture, but it was just so much fun to be able to actually talk with somebody who's there in it and doing really cool things for an industry that, Ernie, both you and I love.
Yeah, well, I guess I like are you speaking of tech in general?
I mean, tech in general, but I mean, podcasting is something that we both know and are growing into. So yeah. Just podcasting. We could have gotten into it a lot more. But just the way the industry and the culture is shifting and how that affects listening habits of people and podcasts, especially in the last 3 to 4 months, our suspicions were confirmed through Mike's own words that because people are not driving, not as many podcasts are being downloaded, which, is a little bit discouraging, but at the same time, obviously radio numbers are down. And so people's listening habits change over time based on their circumstance. So, how the industry changes, because this industry is not going anywhere. This is a growing industry, both in advertising dollars as well as people who are in the space. And so it's just exciting to see how it adapts and how it changes and how smart speakers like Google and Alexa are implementing listening tools, and how Spotify is changing the game completely with buying up major brands like the Joe Rogan Experience. Just, it's going to be really exciting over the next 5 years. Yeah,
it is. I'm glad you really enjoyed that. That was a cool conversation. In general, the dude was just, he felt really down to earth. It wasn't like, I don't know. I guess I'm just now stepping into this place where I'm meeting people like Mike who are, doing incredible things, making incredible moves in the world, taking on leadership in companies. And I guess there's always a wonder of like, there's the stereotypical idea of the CEO that we might have been exposed to in the 90s growing up.
Right.
And I don't know, I just felt like a real down to earth dude. And it was really cool to have that really and see all of the incredible things he's done or hear.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite parts about doing this podcast is, we have had this conversation a number of times, because even at 40 some episodes in, we are still trying to find our voice. And I think that will probably be ongoing. And just the different types of people you and I bring into the fold. I am so excited when I get the chance to talk with somebody who you were introducing me to, because it expands not only my network, which is extremely valuable to me, but my mind and my perception of
totally
what I can do for myself and what others can do for me too.
Totally. Yeah, and I felt that talking to Mike. Like just that's like your space, and then by the end of the conversation, I think I even said it in some form, but I was like, oh man, my mind is just going crazy with questions now that I didn't realize I could have asked, because I just haven't. I don't. Let's say you probably spend time, you in particular, Trey, probably spend time, and maybe even a significant amount of time looking and researching and thinking about, maybe on your own, even technology, podcasting, and things like that. And for me, I don't necessarily think about that. So in preparation for the episode, I was in my place of like, what's his life like? How did he get there? What's his challenge? What did he overcome? And then we got to the end, and my mind was open further to technology and podcasting. I was like, shit, I missed so many like places that I could have, that I'm actually really intrigued about now, that I could have spent the next hour or the last hour talking about. So I definitely feel that for sure. It's the same with Matt.
Absolutely.
I felt the same thing at the end. I was like, wow, there was a lot that I didn't know to expect, and that was really valuable from that.
Matt's conversation was so unique. It was not something that I was expecting. That's all I can really say. I mean, he brought so much value to the table for both of us. It was not, he's coming in, he's going to do an interview on some podcast, and he's going to leave. He brought actual value to our lives, and hopefully to the lives of the people listening to it. I mean, that's what he does. That's what he does for his life. He's on stage helping people find ways to grow their income, to grow their networks. It was really good. Yeah. And, on the same token, I like I said, I love talking with people who you invite on the podcast because, I don't know anything about, animal movement or men's coaching or expanding my own consciousness through these realms. And I'm always open and excited to learn more about these people. And so I too, like yourself, I don't always know the right questions to ask, but at the end of the day, I'm like, shoot, I really wish I would have been able to get more information from them. So there has to be a point where we bring some of these people back on because it's too much. Yeah.
Well, and that was the inspiration for Full Circle. It's just like we get out of there and it's like, oh man, but I really wanted to talk more about X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And that gives us an opportunity to at least dive a little bit more into it until we do get these people back on the podcast. Because I so far do feel a sense of cycling through, like after a year or two, wanting to cycle back through all of the people we've already talked to because their lives are changing, their perspectives are changing, and so are ours. So yeah. That's good stuff.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I did want to mention you had asked me some questions, and I might as well bring it up. Over the weekend, I ran so everything's gone virtual right now, obviously, from racing to even happy hours. But I ran the Find Your Limit virtual race. The idea behind it, and he's a friend of mine. He put on the race with the Columbus Running Company. The idea was start at 6 a.m. in the morning, and then you run 1 mile every 15 minutes. So, for example, if I run a 10-minute mile, then I've got 5 minutes to take a break, and then I have to start a next mile at that 15-minute mark. So the most you can run is 4 miles in an hour, and then the race ends at 9 p.m. So that's a total of 60 miles. Then they did a bonus mile at the end that could be run. And so I ended up running for 5 hours, and I did 20 miles, which was 5 more miles than I'd ever run in a day. So it was really cool, and I was able to push my limits. And I'm sure I could have pushed them a little bit further, but I was happy with the result. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah,
I was really interested to hear about it. One, because I've been personally just obsessing over ultra marathons lately, just watching these documentaries and listening to these people who run just hundreds of miles straight, and how do you do that? And so I'm like, oh man, Trey just ran 20 miles, more than he's ran. I'm wondering what that was like. And then you mentioned a couple things. You mentioned about nutrition and what you learned about that. So I'm interested to hear about all of that. Let's start, if you're cool with it. Just start about maybe giving us a play-by-play of what was happening in your mind and in your body throughout those 20 miles. Like, where did you see yourself take your second wind? Where did you see yourself wanting to quit? Things like that. I'm interested to hear that. Yeah. So I knew going into it, taking a break between miles was going to be both a blessing and a curse. And so I ran with a friend. Her name was Claudia. We set out to run 9-minute miles for as many miles as we could. We did 9-minute miles for, I think, 14 miles before we started to slow down. And then, generally when I run, I run continuously. I run straight through. That's how people usually run. So I don't take food breaks. But knowing how I was going to hit a wall at some point in time, I think around mile 3 or 4, I started snacking on bananas, probably 7 or 8. I had some gel packs that are basically just straight sugar and carbs to give you, more
stamina to continue on. So the first half marathon was fantastic. It felt really good, 13.1 miles, coming in for 14. We felt really good. And then I'd say probably around 15, 16, that's when it really started to get hot. And that's when we both started to cramp up. My calves were cramping and my, the quads, I think they are. I was talking to Bree yesterday, actually, and I can never remember the parts of the muscles in your legs, the front of my legs. Anyway, so yeah, around 16 or 17 started cramping. And I knew the end was going to be in sight at some point in time. So we kind of both just looked at each other and said, hey, all right, we're gonna stop at 20. I think my last mile was around 10 and a half minutes. You know, part of me in retrospect, you know, not being out in the heat right now, I say, oh, I could have done at least 5 more. Maybe that's the case. You always know that you can push yourself further, but eventually you kind of succumb to the talk in your head that, oh, you could be so comfortable right now just sitting down on a chair under a tent in the shade. So yeah, it was. I learned a lot, and there's a lot more that I need to learn, especially about nutrition, because that plays such a huge role in long distance running, and that's something I've barely, you know, touched the tip of the iceberg on.
Yeah, well, barely in comparison. You know, it's a matter of perspective.
Right.
20 miles is pretty damn far, and 5 hours, you know, of running, that's a long time.
Yeah.
I'm really curious. So you mentioned starting to cramp, and then you mentioned starting to imagine yourself under a tent in a chair. Did the cramping come first, and then you started thinking, oh man, it would be really nice to sit down, and then it just kind of, you know, went from there?
Yeah, so I guess a little bit of context. You know, we actually had a pit crew. I think we had 5 or 6 people who were just hanging out in our friend's front yard, and we had a pop-up tent. So there was a tent, and you know, we would get under it between miles. And so there came the curse, where you're starting to feel it, and you're standing under the tent for the few minute break that you have, and you have to talk yourself into starting again. And so, if it was running continuously, then it's less temptation to go back to that comfort that you just experienced 10 minutes ago. That's where the temptation came from. So it started with the heat, and then went to the cramps, and then it went to, okay, I know I can just quit after this mile. I know how relaxing that would be. It was more, or it was as much a mental game as it was a physical one. Yeah,
because you mentioned eventually you succumb to your mind, and I think that's a very important thought, because really I think what we're all doing is trying to take that just a step further. Like, this is where I would typically succumb to my mind. Can I just go one more step before I give myself a break? Or can I go 10 more, 20 more, 30 more steps? How far can I really go? And that's what I love about watching ultra marathon runners, is because that's literally what the entire thing is, at least from what they're saying, is that it's just telling yourself to take one more step. But at what point were you sitting in a chair? Were you halfway through the mile where you said, this is the last one?
I think it was between mile 18 and 19 where we were both kind of struggling, and we just kind of said, let's call it after 20. 20 is a nice round number. It's nothing to scoff at. And so we did. That's the part that I'm not super happy about for my own sake, because we decided prior to running 20 that 20 was going to be the last mile. So it could have been more. Definitely could have done more. It was a flat course that we picked out. It was a 1 mile course in the middle of a neighborhood. But yeah, I mean, you always tell yourself, well, you could have done better.
But you killed it in comparison. I'm not trying to like point out your weaknesses or anything like that. I'm just teasing out different moments of your emotional experience in this, pushing yourself through an extra 5 miles that you've literally never ran in your life. And just seeing what that was like.
And I know I've mentioned him 1,000 times, and I'll mention him again because this is the most relevant he's ever been to one of our conversations. But David Goggins, his book Can't Hurt Me, it's about him taking it to his absolute extreme in every single chapter. He's got a rule called the 40-60 rule, or the 40% rule, I think it is, where he hypothesizes that when we feel like we have reached our limit, we're only at 40% of what we're capable of, and we have another 60% in which we can push ourselves. And that's for extreme performance, but I do feel like I could have pushed myself much, much harder. And he is an ultra marathoner, and he is truly fascinating. So again, for like the 18th time, that book will be in the show notes. And even a friend of mine listened to the audio version of it on Audible, and he's apparently gives like commentary between chapters. So I do want to go back and listen to that. I've heard great things about it.
Yeah, solid dude. One time he ran 8 ultra marathons in 8 weeks.
That's crazy.
It is crazy.
He's next level human being.
Well, I guess that's hearsay, but I heard that from somebody talking about him and his running challenges. But so dude's incredible. Another question I was wondering is if you would have ran alone, do you think that would have changed your experience and your results?
Yes. Yes. I mean, so the person that I ran with, she's a marathoner. She has run a marathon before. So she was also, a little bit upset that she did not at least get to her 27 mile personal record. I think if we both, it was great having the camaraderie, having somebody alongside you for 20 miles, but I think the dynamic of running would have shifted if either one of us were alone. I probably would have pushed myself a little bit harder, but it would have taken away from the experience, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I hear that. I'm not saying that you should have. I'm just curious to see what your reflection of that would be. I'm also really intrigued, I guess, by that 40-60 rule that David Goggins, not to like revert too much, but I realize that's probably a good place to extrapolate. You mentioned how did you say it? Go ahead and say it again.
So I called it the 40-60 rule first. I'm pretty sure he just calls it the 40% rule, where as whenever we feel, and I'm completely paraphrasing, whenever we feel that we've reached our limit, we've only given 40% of what we're capable of.
Yeah. And dude, I think that's so powerful personally, and not just in extreme sports and in running and athleticism, but I think it's an emotional thing too. Yeah. There's a certain point, let's say with anger, before we like say that's enough, and now I'm speaking up, or there's always this like threshold for what we believe that we're capable of, and Kundalini yoga, actually, we talk about that in a few episodes, one in particular with Scott Hilburn, and I just mentioned it from the men's program that I'd been in last year. But Kundalini yoga was one of the most powerful resources in teaching me that. Because when you're in this pose and you're breathing in this strange way, and you've got to hold your arms up, or you've got to hold yourself with your knees bent and in some chi generator pose, and the instructor is telling you that there's still another 2 or 3 minutes, and everything within you, everything in your mind and in your body is telling you, this is literally all I can handle. You have a decision to make, and you can stand up and relieve yourself of that pain. Or what I've learned, I can learn to relax just a little bit more in that place. Yeah. And that's been such an incredible practice is knowing that, when I say I'm done mentally, or when I say I'm done physically, that's actually a place where I can relax even more. And it changes the way I feel and think, and allows me to settle in for that next few steps, or that next few minutes, or that next mile.
Yeah, that's, it's, I don't know how to articulate that. It's, you have to work yourself up to a place where you know that the suffering that you're feeling, the uncomfortableness, is not going to kill you, and that you're body is capable of getting to a place that has never been before. And breaking through that threshold is one of the hardest things that we can do.
And sometimes actually easier. We just don't know how to do it. I'm not saying running 20 miles. I've never done it, dude. But in general, you know, it can feel hard. And then there's also a training of your mind and of your nervous system to be able to relax in the face of challenge, to be able to relax in the face of, temptation. It's like a reflex that is to be built, and I'm still learning to build it. I'm not at all saying I've got it figured out, but I've been running lately too, and I've been pushing my edge as well with it, and then also learning to expand my consciousness just a bit more when I'm at that threshold. You know, expand, not just feeling my body and my legs and my shoulders or whatever's tightening up or whatever's starting to throb a little bit or whatever my mind's telling me, but then to also feel the path, to feel the trees. And as I expand my awareness out a little bit, it's like loosening your belt up. This is probably a terrible analogy when we're talking about health, but it's like loosening your belt up after Thanksgiving dinner. It's just like, oh, okay, there's a little more space for me to breathe and to keep moving. It's crazy, man, that we've been conditioned, right? That's a popular word, but we've been conditioned or trained to have a breaking point or to have a stopping point. And
so, I'm curious because when I reach that perceived breaking or stopping point, I have, I guess mental talk, or I've got self-talk that I use to kind of get me past those barriers. And when you're there, especially as you break into running, and I mean you do CrossFit too. I mean, do you have self-talk that you use to get you past that place that you thought you were going to or had to stop?
Yeah, I guess I experiment with both personally. Not to say that either is right or wrong, and maybe they're both wrong. Who knows? But sometimes they work. I've used very calm and gentle affirmations. So like, although I'm like huffing and puffing and like like just pushing myself or whatever, like physically. I'll sometimes, and I've sometimes used just like, all right, man, you're doing great. All right, keep going. You're doing great. And bringing a sense of calm into my voice rather than like this pent up, like, gotta keep going, which is actually useful for some, probably a lot of people. But again, for me, it's about relaxing a little bit more while I push that next level. But then like today was totally different. The self-talk was all about, just make it to this next thing, and then you're done. But my body didn't want to get there, and so I was thinking about the trees. I was thinking about the path. I was thinking about the, literally imagining my shoulders and my legs, energetically expanding out, into these trees and into the grass, and it relieved a lot of tension and allowed me to make it around, that last time.
That's so great, man.
I do both, I guess.
That's great.
Yeah. I'm still learning, man. I don't have any idea about any of this because I actually recently took a break from CrossFit to actually just see what I could do with running. I was really interested about it. And then after I started running, I realized it really serves a lot of needs. It serves a lot of wants in my life. One, physical activity, exercise. Two, pushing that edge of endurance. Three, alone time. And four, I have an earbud in sometimes and I'm listening to podcasts or YouTube videos on certain topics that I care about. So I've been doing that instead of CrossFit lately, and it's been really nice. But
That's
I'm
fantastic.
fresh to it is what I mean. The things I'm saying, yes, are applicable to running into life, but as far as the sport and the art of endurance running, I'm still learning about that. And 20 miles, dude, after me trying to get, my current goal is 4 miles, in 36 minutes, so a 9-minute mile.
That's great.
And you did that for 20 fucking miles. So you have a lot more to say about like endurance running than I can possibly say.
Oh, hell, man. Next time they do a Find Your Limit race, I know who I'm going to give a call.
David Goggins?
Yeah, I'll call David. But then when he doesn't answer me, I'm gonna call you.
Okay, cool. Well, let me know if he doesn't pick up.
Yeah, man, it was a lot of fun. I'm glad I did it. I learned some things about myself, and I know I want to continue pursuing it. I've done 2 half marathons officially, and then this year, which is I don't know, I know, it was the pandemic. I got out running more than I have ever. I've probably run that 14 mile distance probably 10 or 11 times now this year.
Nice.
And so I have always told myself that I was not a marathoner. I was never going to run 26.2 miles, that my knees wouldn't hold up, but that was just an excuse that I was telling myself. That's all it was, I was blaming my knees, and that's, I ran this 20 miles on Saturday and my knees felt fit. My knees were not the issue by any means. It was my muscles. So that was a bullshit excuse I was telling myself because I didn't want to put in the work to do it. I know now that I'm capable of running that distance and hopefully more. Will I ever reach ultra status? That's a big time commitment. That's a big time investment. So maybe not. I know I'm capable of it. I was holding myself back by preconceived limits that I had set for myself.
Yeah, man. Like preconceived limits. So knowing before you've even started what you're capable of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And how that can keep you from actually realizing what potential you could manage in that moment.
Dude, I will tell you, in the past, 7 or 8 months, that has, without even realizing it, that's what I've set out to do for myself. Am I capable of going an entire year without drinking? Yes, I am. And I'm even considering just making it a full calendar year, which will be about 15 months. Am I capable of reading a book a week? Yes, I am. And so it's very rarely, at least in my personal stance, it's very rarely an actual limit we set on ourselves. It's, are we going to make it a priority first and foremost? And then if we make it a priority, are we going to put in the work to do so? We're going to set aside the amount of time that is going to take to reach these goals and push past these limits.
So it brings up an interesting thought in my mind. Interesting to me. Well, if it's interesting to you or anyone else, it remains to be seen. But you're talking about pushing your limits and seeing what you're capable of. And so one thing I was thinking about today is resourcefulness. Mm-hmm. And in particular with running, I had this insight today. So the other day, so I'd been running 4 miles or whatever, and then it was a certain amount of time. I don't remember. Maybe it was like a 10-minute mile or something.
Sure.
And my goal is currently to get that down to a 9-minute mile for 4 miles. And
that's great.
And then 2 days ago, I decided to just run a mile as fast as I could, just to see what it would feel like or what it would be like to be that fast or whatever. To know to know what it looks like to be under 9 minutes. And I did great. I think I was sub 8, which was good for me not running in a while. But the point of this is when I ran that mile and then I came out today with the intention of running 4 miles, with the intention of running a certain loop, hoping that it was going to be 4 miles. It was 3.3. But I went out today and had an insight while I was running that the way I was running to get sub 8 that day when I was running a mile is not the same way that I would be running to get it sub 9 4 miles in a row.
Right.
Because I was thinking prior to today that there was this and maybe you could shine light on this, but I was thinking today that it's not these longer strides and faster push that will necessarily get that, like I was doing for that 1 mile, but it was more short, choppy, and cyclical, like clean movements that I was making today that got me the sub 9 for 3.5 miles or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably not the best person to talk about the dynamics of running. I can tell you that I have been in and out of shape dozens of times in my life, and at some point running 4 miles would kill me. It would hurt. It was really, I was so far out of shape that running 4 miles, all 4 miles being under 9 minutes, that was tough. Now I'm in really good shape, and I'll run 6 or 7 miles all under 8 minutes. And
Nice.
I can, if I'm really pushing my first mile, I can usually run that under 7 minutes. And so again, I'm not.
Okay, cool. That's fine.
I'm not a physical therapist or a trainer or anything like that.
Yeah,
so
it sounds like we need to get Bree in here to have a conversation
Yes,
on running.
exactly.
But I'll go to the point that I'm making anyways, or trying to make, or maybe like just proposing for conversation. I was resourcing different. This is how I'll say it. I was resourcing different today when I set out to run the 4 miles than I was when I set out to run the fast 1 minute mile.
Yes, that makes perfect sense.
And I was resourcing my body and my movement differently. And it reminded me of another story that maybe will come up later, but I started putting these pieces together of if we're pushing our edge. I guess one thing I missed about that is still setting some type of goal or something. Because when I set out to push my edge, but I don't know where I'm ending, then my mind can tell me this is my edge. Actually, kind of like you guys with this 60-mile race, you're just like, I'm out to find my edge and push it. And then, if you don't know where you're stopping at the end of that, I feel like it's harder to resource to push your edge. Maybe I'm missing what I'm trying to say here. Go ahead and see if I'm being clear.
No, that's very interesting. I have, like I mentioned a second ago, I guess I didn't say this explicitly. If I'm going out on a shorter run, and when I say shorter, that's usually under 5 miles, that's when I have the problem of coming out the gate too fast. And as much as I love to brag about my first mile being 6:45, that just kills me. I mean, it really, really hurts me for the rest of my run. So if I'm setting out to do a 10-mile run, then I'm able to keep my pace a little bit more consistent. And I don't know if I want to call it a problem, but I always set my route ahead of time, like always. I'll go on to Garmin or Map My Run, and I'll find out exactly where I'm running and how far it's going to be, so I know what to expect. I think Saturday was probably, to your point, one of the first times I ever set out on a run where I didn't know how far I was going to run. And it's interesting. It's something that I'm considering doing again, because if I find myself 10 miles in and being, 5 miles from home, that's going to make me push myself or call an Uber. It's something that I would like to do more of. I don't know.
So my thought as you say this is like, I wonder what would have happened if you set out, and let me just play this through. Like if you set out and you said, I'm doing 28 miles. And I'm not stopping until I get to that 28 miles. If you didn't set that out, like for instance now, and again, I'm not at all trying to say take away from the win, because there's so much win there. I'm just trying to let's even say you set out to run 20 miles, or 21 miles, knowing that 21 miles is an edge because you've never done it, or it's a potentially an edge. You could just breeze right through it. Then when you start to meet your edges, there's still a pull to get further. There's still a pull to get further. And then there's also like feedback, because like if you set out to run 21 miles and then you make it to 21 miles, you realize this is how I pushed all my edges. And then if you don't make it to 21 miles, you have feedback of what that next edge is for you or something like that. And I'm saying this because this is what I'm trying to implement into my life, is like setting out a goal that clearly meets an edge. Right. And then doing everything I can to get to that goal. We can talk about that another time, but doing everything I can to get to that goal. And then if I stop short of that goal, then I have a measure of like the edge between me and that goal, as opposed to setting out to just make as much money as I can, not really having like a place to gauge it from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Like a checkpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's interesting trying to have this conversation right now because I'm not really clear on it. And I guess I'm searching as I speak for like the proper dynamic.
And that's fine. And just to give you a little bit more context, so I just randomly picked 37 miles was my goal. It's my favorite number. I'm like, what the hell? That is far past anything I've ever run before. So let's just try and run 37 miles. And so I guess that was my edge. And I fell 17 miles short of that. And so I knew what 15 miles felt like. Now I know what 20 miles feels like. I guess my next step would be I want to know what a full marathon feels like.
Totally.
You may have an edge, but when you reach it, then you can keep pushing it out further. And I guess there's been a lot of mental struggle for me. Obviously, I had my big revelation last year in regard to happiness and looking internally instead of externally. And I've struggled since to articulate the difference between wanting more and wanting to accomplish goals, because I think those are two very different things.
Whoa.
Go ahead.
No. I'm just saying that's important, I think.
Yeah, it is. And you can want more money, to your point, but this is where I struggle to articulate it, because I don't think money is going to make anybody happier. But there are certain intrinsic goals that you have, and it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, in the most fundamental way possible. There's a lot of people, especially right now, who are looking for those basic needs to be fulfilled. I think you and I, Ernie, are searching for that self-actualization, and I don't think that is going to come from money or material items. It's the fulfillment that we get from accomplishing goals, whether that's running 37 miles or having a number one podcast. I don't know, but there's that fine line that I have that's still blurry to me. I guess blurry and finer antonyms, but the point is, until we can define what it is that our goal is, I have trouble distinguishing the two between wanting more or having a goal. Do you know what I'm saying?
I think so. And I'll just come from my angle, and then we'll try to find it in the middle somewhere.
Yeah.
For me, there's this idea, and for me, it's less about fulfillment and more about peace. And maybe they're the same thing. Like if you're fulfilled, then you're at peace with your life. And maybe if you're at peace, then you're fully filled, right? You're fulfilled. And becoming a person who is becoming a being, an essence of a spirit, of this human being who is just at peace with his understanding of how amazing it is to be alive and what we're capable of as beings, as people, as humans. And then just being at peace, and then also creating. So like I'm just at peace. And since I'm at peace, and since I understand what it means to be a human and what's possible, and that there's literally nothing stopping us to create anything, well, what do I choose to pick out to create? Oh, that's interesting. This is what's happening to stop me from getting there. Oh, interesting. This is what's happening to keep me from peace now that I'm, moving towards this thing. So I guess maybe I'm hearing you, and maybe that's what it means to me. Maybe I'm saying something completely different.
I like how you said that you're at peace, because I think that's the distinguishing note there. You can be at peace and aspire to accomplish certain goals, or you can not be at peace, or have chaos internally and want more to quell that chaos, but nothing short of finding internal peace is ever going to quell that. Nothing external will ever quell that. Is that a good way of putting it?
Feels pretty solid, dude. I read this. I'm reading this book. It's fucking awesome, dude. I love it so much. And it depends on like who's listening and whether they're going to be like, whatever, dude. Let me see if I can pull up the title. And I might even try to pull up the actual quote. I think it's called, I won't pull up the quote, I'll just paraphrase it. It's called The Yoga of Time Travel. And I'm not very far through it. I'm probably like a fifth of the way through it. But and you probably know this feeling where you've heard something several times, but then you just hear it again, and you hear it in a different context, and it was set up differently, and then it's like, oh, that just like added a piece to the puzzle that was so important, and it feels really cool to have that insight. I mean, the paradigm shift, and the picture that I had in my head. I'll just talk about that and not necessarily what his writing was saying, but I'll do a little bit of both here. The picture in my head was he was talking about all of these realities existing from this moment. There's a million, that's ridiculous. It's infinite. There's an infinite amount of realities. I could, and just to like really hammer this home, I could change the subject. We could get disconnected. Somebody could walk in and start yelling. I could say, screw you, Trey, I'm done doing this podcast. Like there's just an infinite amount of possibilities. Okay. And every single moment moving infinitely forward has that infinite amount of possibilities. Okay. So in my mind, I was seeing this like these layers in almost like the form of a map. So just like this crazy 3-dimensional map, like this orb, let's say, this like, let's just call it the universe then, fuck it. But this map, and he said something along the lines of, your ego is the pen in that map. So the ego, this sense of identity that you have about yourself, is your pen in this infinite amount of space and possibility. What you believe about yourself is the pen. Boom. That's where you're at in this moment, because that's what you're capable of, because that's what your ego says. So it's like everything that is possible and everything that is happening is a manifestation, a choice, not a choice, but a manifestation of what we believe about ourselves. And so it's like ploop, right there in the map. And so when we talk about having peace, it's like, for me, this idea of we can, as human beings, I could say there's nothing stopping us from getting anything that we want. But in actuality, and especially to this reference, everything we think about ourselves is stopping us from getting to that thing we want. And so, but in reality, if we could shed what we thought about ourselves, we could do whatever we wanted. You could just sit here and you could say, I want that thing, and then get it, whether it's instantaneous or whether it's 2 days or 10 months or 2 years down the line. And so when we come to peace, we can choose what things we want to create, And then in a perfect world without ego, boom, we would create those things.
Right.
But in reality, our ego steps in and it's like, this is where you stop. This is where you fail. This is where somebody comes in and causes a disruption that ends your chance of getting that thing. And so I guess like the reality of it is at this point is, yes, there's this level of not having peace inside and then choosing to create things through the grit and willpower and the hard-nosed battleground, warrior that just somehow like stomps and claws his way to getting that thing so that they can, feel better and be more at peace. Then there's this other one. It's like you're at peace and you're choosing what to create and then just working with whatever like pops up, removing that ego from the situation, boom, back, bringing yourself back to peace, recommitting, re-choosing, or whatever that thing might be.
I think it's been a while since we've drawn a parallel between meditation and life, but if there ever was a perfect one, I think that's what it was, because that's what we do in meditation. We have a thought and we bring ourselves back. We have a thought and we bring ourselves back. We have a disruption in our life. We deal with it and we bring ourselves back to status quo, back to level-headedness, back to even. And I think that's really what distinguishes us, or, those among us who are high performers, high achievers, people who, the Elon Musks of the world, or the Mike Cadens, the people who have these venture-backed companies who create incredible things. They are the ones who can manage their egos, who can realize that there are going to be setbacks in life. They aren't going to complain about them. They aren't going to blame other people. They're not going to even blame themselves. They're going to deal with it, and they're going to reset, and they're going to move forward. And I think that's a very valuable lesson that it's not taught in schools. It's something that we need to learn and we need to encompass. And I guess that's part of our mission here in what we're doing.
Yeah, I think it's what we all want to learn. Maybe we need to learn it in order for the world to be whatever the world's supposed to be. I feel like maybe we're like all yearning for that thing, yearning for that level of peace, and then entangling, in our ego, our belief about who we are and what the world is, entangling within that to get to X peace,
Yeah.
And it's hard to say. It's hard to say which one's right or wrong, or that I and you have, that you and I have encompassed it in any realm, but we're definitely like on the note, at times where we strike it and we're like, yeah, that was it, that was it. And yeah, it feels like a natural pull from the spirit, from just
right.
Like our sense of human beings to want to be at peace, to want to be safe, to want to feel completely free and relaxed in the world. And sometimes we get mixed up in what that means. And maybe there's, maybe we find something that makes us feel that way once or twice, and then eventually it's not, and then we're like, oh shit. No, but now in my mind, my ego is wrapped around the idea that it is this thing, and just start shaving off the edges of our self-proclaimed self, or not, maybe unconscious and conscious proclamations of self, I guess.
You said that book was called The Yoga of Time Travel?
Yeah.
Okay. Eventually there's going to be a resource on our website at onemosaic.life or the mosaiclifepodcast.com, as Ernie likes to use. They all go to the same place. that will have all of the books ever mentioned in any episode listed. It's going to be, I'm really excited about that tool. I just have not built it yet. I'm excited for myself and hopefully anybody else who wants to use it. But that book will be in this episode's show notes. So, yeah.
Yeah, solid. How was your recovery from the race?
It was good. I was sore Sunday, a little bit sore yesterday, and I feel good today. I was going to. Here's an excuse. I planned to go out for a run this morning before it got hot. I did not get up in time. Still may today in the mid 90s, but God, man, I would honestly rather run when it was 25 degrees out than when it was even 85. Heat just kills me. And so I'm trying to do my best to train through it. And it just, take me from like a 7:15 mile to like an 8.5. It's hard.
Yeah. So I want to just challenge this idea, if you're cool with it.
Yeah.
That the heat kills you. Like that there's a lot of power behind that. And you mentioned that was the first thing that started the domino effect in your run on Saturday.
Yeah.
So I'm interested if I want to challenge you to run if it's safe, if you feel comfortable in the heat, well hydrated with proper nutrition. I don't want you to push your edge in a way that you want to, like sometimes we want to feel like a badass, and so we're like, but I'm actually curious to see if you were to go out and run, maybe it's not 85-degree heat today, maybe it's another day when it's 75, but to get to that point where you feel the heat taking its toll,
right,
and then at that edge to transmute it or to change it in some way, like for instance, imagining the heat being a warm bath just running over you and starting to feel all of the parts of your skin from your head to your toe, like literally like a meditation that would bring you through your body, but using the heat as that connection to your skin and feeling it all over your body, and seeing if there's actually a possibility that you could enjoy being in the heat, that you could feel empowered by the heat in that moment.
Absolutely.
And see what happens.
I am with you, and I've been there before, and I know it's possible. It's a hard reset every year, and so I do need for me to get back there. So I will, and I will meditate on that while I do it.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear what it's like.
Yeah.
Are we nearing an end?
What's that?
I said, are we nearing an end? I feel it.
I think so.
I feel it kind of like pulling us to say, hey, it's time to wrap this shit up. Yeah,
we've got a lot of exciting things coming out over the next couple months. We were just talking about how we're nearing episode 50, which is it's just a milestone. It's a nice big round number. So that's exciting. It's exciting that we were able to do something and take it so far already. And I really look forward to hitting 50 and hitting the next 50. It's just going to, as we continue seeing ourselves grow along with the podcast, I just can't imagine. I can't imagine the edges that we're going to find.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder, man. Yeah. I'm starting to find more comfort in the systems around this podcast, but I've definitely pushed a lot of edges in continuing and pulling forward. I was talking about it with a friend recently, so it'll be interesting to see, because, honestly, I don't necessarily know that there would be an edge if we just continued what we're doing. However, you and I were creative souls, man. We just like are creative individuals, and we see ways to serve, and we're like, man, that feels really good. And I think that's where, you know, our edges start to come up. And so I imagine that's definitely going to happen in the next year or two, as we transform this into the most authentic form of you and I, separately and connected, and into the most powerful form of transformation for people.
Yeah, and we're not, you know, we started with 3 types of episodes, conversations, we started with conversations and meditations, and then eventually brought Lisa in, I think episode 11, for our first interview, which was really exciting, and we've done many since then. And we've got we brought talks, which I think are extremely powerful. If you haven't listened to Ernie's Revved Up, it is the most popular talk we have on our website. And we've even, you know, starting to build a partnership with Robbie and, you know, some of his meditations, and that's been exciting too. So who knows, you know, what possibilities we have in regard to friendships and partnerships and where we can take this. Yeah.
Last but not least, man, I'm just I'm thankful for anyone who's hearing these words right now, because you've listened for the past hour, not knowing what to expect, but here connecting with us, and I appreciate you taking your time to be here, and I hope that you've gained 1 or 2 or several insights that could impact your life if you take them and start to implement them.
Absolutely. Ernie, thanks for doing this with me.
Yeah, brother.
All right. I will talk to you soon.
Yeah, take care.
Again, from Ernie and I, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. We truly appreciate it. And moving out of this episode, we challenge you to push your edge and find out what you're capable of achieving. If you want to find out more about the Mosaic Life podcast, please visit onemosaic.life. And you can see all of our episodes on there, all of our interviews, all of our conversations, talks, meditations, and you can also sign up for the Circle, which will alert you of new guest announcements and new episodes when they are released. It's free to sign up and easy to do. You can also find us on Instagram at One Mosaic Life, as well as Facebook. That's right, we've got a Facebook page now. So if Facebook is more your style and speed, just search the Mosaic Life podcast and you'll find us on there. Thank you all so much. We hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful week. You know what? We just want you to have a wonderful time between now and the next time we see you. Thank you all again, and be well.